All right, so this, of course, is the big story that we are tracking on WION. Russia has carried out an incursion into Ukraine as was expected, and there have been explosions that have been reported in several cities across Ukraine. And according to media reports that have come in, all of these are because of missile strikes in a lot of instances. Now, this is how things stand at this point of time. Russia has launched what is being described as an all-out invasion of Ukraine by land, air and sea. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that his aim is, of course, to demilitarize and also to denazify Ukraine. The missiles rained down on Ukrainian cities and explosions were heard near the capital city of Kiev. And we're also being told that a second wave of missiles have struck Ukraine, and about 40 soldiers and about 10 civilians have been killed so far. Meanwhile, there are more breaking inputs that have come in, and this is what is being said, that there is a second wave of missile strikes that has rained down on Ukraine. Ukraine is, of course, fighting for its freedom, is how the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has described the conflict right now. While the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called for an urgent meeting of the NATO leaders. And South Korea has also joined the sanctions against Russia. Now, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on all citizens in Ukraine who are ready to defend the country to come forward, saying that Kiev will issue weapons to anyone who wants to be deployed in the battle against Russia. The European Union will freeze Russian assets, halt access to its banks to the European financial markets, and will also target Kremlin's interests over its barbaric attack. According to officials, American President Joe Biden has said that Washington and its allies will impose severe sanctions over what he called as Putin's premeditated war. The Ukraine's military has said that it has so far destroyed about 4 Russian tanks near the eastern city of Kharkiv. And according to what Ukraine claims, it has also reportedly killed about 50 troops in the Luhansk region and has also downed 6 Russian aircrafts. All of these are claims by the Ukrainians that have been denied by the Russians. Central European nations have also started preparations for an influx of refugees who are fleeing from Ukraine. Now, there were several cars that were to be seen queued up at the Moldovan border. Ukraine, for its part, has shut down its airspace, while Russia has suspended movement of commercial vessels in the Azov Sea. Now, this, of course, is what we will keep tracking over the next few hours. Biden will be meeting with his G7 counterparts to map out harsher measures against Russia. Meanwhile, EU leaders will also discuss further sanctions at an emergency meeting, and NATO's ambassadors will also hold an emergency meeting, and the United Nations Security Council will also convene to discuss a resolution condemning this attack by Russia on its neighbour. The European Central Bank policymakers are also gathered for what could be described as a meeting to try and resolve the crisis. So these are some of the developments that have taken place. And remember, the incursion by the Russians into Ukraine started in the early hours of this morning, immediately after the statement by the Russian president, who said that he has sanctioned a military operation in the Donbas region. But according to reports that have come in, this is not an operation limited to the Donbas region, but rather has in fact taken over a large part of the Ukrainian nation. Now, after months of speculations, calculations, assessments and back-to-back diplomatic talks and whirlwind diplomatic tours by the likes of Anthony Blinken and the French President Emmanuel Macron, Russia has started its invasion into Ukraine from land and sea. So let's take you through the events as they've happened. Firstly, the Russian president delivered a speech in which he announced the beginning of a special military operation to demilitarize and to denazify Ukraine. This is what he said in his address. Listen.
Circumstances require firm and immediate action from us. Donbass's People's Republic asked for help from Russia. In this regard, according to the Article 51, Part 7 of the United Nations Charter, with the consent of the Russian Federation Council, and in accordance with the ratified agreement on 22nd February of this year on friendship and mutual aid with Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, I decided to conduct a special military operation. Its goal is the protection of people who during 8 years suffered from abuse and genocide from the Kiev regime.
All right, so that was the statement that was given by the Russian president, and immediately after that, at 5 o'clock in the early hours of the morning, right after Putin's televised speech ended, this is what the scene began to look like. Russia started one of the biggest attacks against another state in Europe since the end of the Second World War. Russian missiles rained down on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine reported columns of troops pouring across its borders into eastern Chernihiv, Kharkiv and Luhansk regions. The Russian troops entered the cities of Odessa and also Mariupol in the south by sea. Now, the initial wave of strikes appear to involve cruise missiles, artillery and also airstrikes. And predominantly what Russia was trying to dismantle on the Ukrainian front was its military infrastructure and also its border positions, including air bases. Flashing lights were of course seen above the skies of the Ukrainian border regions. After just about 3 hours into the attack, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed to have neutralized Ukraine's air bases and also Ukraine's air defense systems. Now, explosions were also heard even before there was sunlight in the early hours of the morning in Ukraine today. There was gunfire that could be heard at the main airport and sirens blared across multiple cities. Eyewitness videos show smoke billowing from the Ukrainian military airport in Chugaev. And reports say that the Ukrainian border guards were firing back as the Russian troops unleashed artillery barrages as part of an attack backed by Belarus. The air raid sirens rang out in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, in the early hours of the morning. The siren was heard playing out across the morning traffic, and just hours after the Russian troops launched their anticipated attack. A large number of people, of course, were out on the streets, where long lines of traffic on the road leading out of the capital city were witnessed. And although the Russian military has said that they did not attack populated areas in Ukraine, there is a video that shows a missile hitting an airport in Ivano-Frankivsk city. A missile was seen falling on the establishment and then exploding with a bang. The thick billows of dark black smoke were seen coming out of the buildings as soon as the missile hit the area.
Dear Ukrainians, this morning Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in the Donbass. Russia carried out strikes on our military infrastructure, on our border guards. Explosions were heard in many cities of Ukraine. We introduced martial law throughout the state. A minute ago, I had a conversation with US President Joe Biden. The US is starting to gather international support. Today we need you. Each of you needs to be calm. If possible, stay at home, please. We are working, the army is working. The entire security and defense sector of Ukraine is working.